Evelyn to Philip, May 12, 1944. Dearest hubby, your letters of May 5th, the one meant for the 5th, and that of the 6th came this afternoon. I really hadn't expected any mail and was pleasantly surprised. Glad, too, that the packages reached you in good time. I figured a package every 2 weeks would be just right, just as you did. René is really Paris's childhood sweetheart in the book. His feelings for Cassie are much different, even though he does offer to marry her in the story. You can have any and all of the Claire Pruitt pictures. I am sending along one of Adele and one of me when they are ready. That will leave me the other two of Adele, which I want to show to everyone before I send them off to you. Sorry I neglected to tell you how I voted, sweet, but Democratic, of course. I thought you knew. There isn't anything in your May 6th letter that requires comment. It was hot today and I did plenty of sweating. My mother washed early this morning. It was a huge wash, having accumulated over a week or more. After toting it over and hanging it up, cleaning up the house, giving Adele her lunch, and having my own, I proceeded to cut the grass. I had trimmed the hedges earlier this week. My mother has a pair of those shears for just such work. I was sweating away when up comes the postman with your two most welcome letters. Page 2. On looking over your letter of the 6th, there is one comment I would like to make. You mention how handy Red is at various tasks. Yes, I wish very much that you were that way. It shows ambition, not to mention willingness to learn everything. You have the latter, sweet, but there are times I wonder at the former. You are willing enough to learn everything you like, but sometimes you fail to be practical. No hard feelings, huh? I've brought Adele down on 2 occasions for her pre-bedtime glass of milk. She sits in the high chair to drink it, her feet bare. When this is the case, she rubs the sole of her foot along the upper part of my leg where it is smooth and it tickles. Reminds me, ... Darn it. Faye is going back to camp with Morris and is taking the baby along. They are leaving Monday. He expects to go overseas in about 4 months and wants them to be with him. Anne has been with Tony since last Sunday, rather Friday, and will return this Sunday. She made the trip alone, her mother and sister caring for Richie. Everyone seems to be seeing their various mates, and it gets me to thinking, when will I see you, baby? Soon, I hope. Dot doesn't expect Snuff to leave this month as the Navy quota for this month has been filled. Guess it will be sometime in June. Lil called this afternoon to tell me that she had sent out a package for Mom for Mother's Day. Hope you didn't forget to remember Mom on Mother's Day. I had a nice V-mail as usual from Sid. Well, dearest sweetheart, I've had my say, and I'm ready for the easy chair. I love you so much. I am your Ev. Philip to Evelyn, 12 May 1944. Evie, my darling, after yesterday's long but uninformative and no doubt tedious letter, I think it is only fair that I devote this one to telling you a little about my activities of the past few days. What I have been doing rather than what I have been thinking. Night before last, as I mentioned in passing in my last, I went to the Base Theater to see Oklahoma, and then went to the dance at the Aero Club. The picture was the typical blood and thunder Western melodrama, but the lively action and Western locale was a welcome change from the ordinary run-of-the-mill pictures I have been seeing of late. John Wayne is the same big, likable cowboy that he has played in a dozen pictures. Martha Scott is pretty, without too much sex appeal, in the time-honored tradition of Western heroines. The plot itself is the hackneyed theme of the poor but honest cowboy winning out over innumerable obstacles to win the girl and the glory from the clever, unscrupulous promoter. It's been done hundreds of times before, but it still makes for an exciting evening at the movies. The dance was just getting underway when I got to the Aero Club. The orchestra consisted of 5 GIs playing the piano, bass, clarinet, and sax, trumpet, and drums. A very small aggregation, you will say, but believe me, sweet, they made up in quality what they lacked in volume. Their arrangements were wonderful, their style smooth, their rhythm and musicianship flawless. In short, they left nothing to be desired. The hit tune over here at present is Pesan Mucho. I'm only guessing at the spelling, but I'm sure you are familiar with that lovely Mexican melody. I'm very fond of it myself. Anyhow, their rendition of this was right on the ball. The trumpet solo on the melody was so perfectly in accord with the way I think it ought to be shaded that I couldn't help but wonder at it. My prime object in going to the dance, though, was to watch Klein dance. Ordinarily, he is the most awkward gook you ever saw, but on the dance floor he is a marvel of rhythm. He is an insatiable clown, however, both on and off the dance floor, and after watching his atrocious conduct towards his partner, one cannot help but wonder why the girls put up with him after some of his more outrageous antics. He makes faces every few minutes, and with his natural equipment he can look hideous enough to turn a strong stomach. He startles his inexperienced partners by breaking into the most intricate and uninhibited jive steps, whispers outrageous suggestions in their unbelieving ears, loves them up shamelessly and openly at every opportunity, and generally behaves in so boorish and lascivious a manner that it is embarrassing just to watch him. Still, I have yet to see a girl walk out on him. Quite the contrary. After seeing him dance, some of the girls actually have the nerve to ask him to dance. I'll never understand that. He is a most accommodating cuss, though, and though it puzzles me as much as it must you, I can't help but like the guy. Knowing that I was there solely to watch him perform, he obliged me by confining his dancing and clowning to the area of the floor just in front of where I was sitting on the sidelines. Moreover, he displayed all his tricks and a few new ones for my edification. As soon as the music started, he left me to show up on the floor with the only really pretty girl in the place. She was a slight but well-formed blonde, a good little dancer, but not very hep. This latter failing bothered Klein not one bit. He merely did his stuff and let her more or less shift for herself. That is, as far as the dancing went. Actually, he was all over her like a tent, hugging her, nuzzling her, making her look silly by suddenly taking off one of his innumerable breaks to leave her standing blankly bewildered and motionless until he could deign to again pick her up where he had left her, and seemingly making such an ass of himself and her that I marveled at her willingness to put up with it. On several occasions I observed the ire mounting in her, but Klein, as I said before, is no dummy and sensed the storm warnings in time to pull off a new piece of foolery that left her laughing. The poor gal was so puzzled by his antics that she didn't rightly know whether to be insulted or amused. I think that accounts for his success with the gals. He makes it commensurate upon them that they give him the benefit of the doubt. Shortly after the intermission, he came across the floor to me, literally dragging a girl, a brunette this time, in his wake. Without any ado whatever, he bowed exaggeratedly in my direction and introduced his acquaintance of but a few moments as follows: "Corporal Strongan, meet my wife." I think I blushed most unbecomingly at that juncture, but managed somehow a foolish "how do you do." Klein didn't even give her a chance to answer, because he immediately got her in a bear hug, and she was much too busy trying to evade his clutches to bother with more formalities. On the dance floor, she was a joy to watch. She danced as lightly as any fairy I ever imagined. More surprisingly, she matched Klein's own brilliant and intricate style of dancing step for step. During the next intermission, he stopped over long enough to confide that he was going to make this gal or break a leg trying. They disappeared from the dance floor shortly after. I noticed him whispering very earnestly in her ear. He assured me next day that she was most receptive of his advances, to put it as delicately as I know how. Either he's the world's biggest liar or a fitting successor to the immortal Casanova. I'm rather inclined to believe him, because although he has unwittingly repeated some of his more lurid adventures, of which there are enough to fill a book, he has yet to change a single detail in the retelling. Page 2. So much for the dance. Did I hear you say too much? Yesterday was entirely spent on the payroll. In the evening, I took in the early show, which was The Man from Down Under, with Charles Laughton, Richard Carlson, Donna Reed, and Binnie Barnes. This one was surprisingly good. I enjoyed it because the story was unusual, the acting superb, the action scenes exciting and suspenseful, and the direction so able. Charles Laughton, of course, does his usual masterful job of acting. Binnie Barnes is likewise dependable in this sense, and she turns in one of her best efforts here. I particularly liked Richard Carlson. He has long been one of my favorites. Donna Reed is winsome and well cast. The plot, though, remains the important factor in The Man from Down Under. It is the sort of story that makes a good book. The prize-fighting sequence is the realest, most exciting, and most convincing it has been my pleasure to see in a long time. After the show, I started on my daily letter to you. This took until bedtime, as you can judge by the length of it. Your V-mail of the 4th arrived with Gloria's of the same date. I assure you, baby, that you and Adele aren't the only ones in the family that have a fondness for Kaz. If it is at all possible, you can bet we will have one shortly after I get home. How else will we be able to hit the road for a month or two before I'll want to settle down to work? I haven't forgotten our plans, Chippy. I couldn't, 'cause I think about them constantly. Your explanation of the pumpkin's tendency to pigeon-toedness is new to me, but I'll take your word for it, and I won't worry about it. Incidentally, do you know of the bill in Congress to provide medical attention for the families of the men in the service? I believe it has been passed by both the House and the Senate and requires only the President's signature to become law. From the tone of Gloria's letter, I would say that there is at least one person who can appreciate my devilish form of writing. Glad to hear that we now have 2 corporals in the family. Hope that he winds up at least a buck sergeant. Today was another busy one for me. Think I'll go to the movies tonight for a change. There was no fresh mail for me today, so for the first time in a couple of weeks, I'm caught up with you. Can't think of another single thing to say at this time, sweet, so I'll say adieu for the time being. Tell Mom I still have her letter in mind, but somehow can't get around to it. Tell your mom that she has owed me a letter for too long, and I only have so much patience, and it has just about run out, and I'll be angry with her if I don't hear from her soon. Ask your dad if he won't write to tell me about his new job. Why don't you send Ann Furr's address as I asked you to do some weeks ago? I'm still waiting for Lil's letter. What about the one that Jack N. sent to us? I haven't received that either. Dottie, I believe, owes me a letter. The weather has been beautiful these past few days, and I can't help but think how wonderful it would be to be home at this time. These balmy spring days inspire many, many thoughts of home, Evie, darling, and this particular form of homesickness does me a whole lot of no good. The desire to be with you grows and grows until I hardly know how to contain it. Got any good ideas, baby? My best love to the cherub and you and all the family. I am, just as always, only a little more so each passing day. Your Phil. P.S. Don't be too impatient for those bonds, honey. It'll probably be a month or two yet before you begin receiving them. I'm hoping we won't collect too many of them, if you know what I mean.